Hare Krishna, devotees, welcome to day 62 of our Bhakti Vaibhava seminar on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3. We are in the 22nd chapter of the third canto. And this 22nd chapter is titled, let me see, The Marriage of Kardama Muni and Devahuti. And yesterday we were in the section section 3, Kardama accepts Devahuti. That's from verse 15 to verse 20, and we had done verses 15 and 16, and we are up to verse 17. So let us get into it. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pasya Chadeshatarane Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindubhya eva cha. Patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Right. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, verse 17, chapter 22 of the third canto. I have heard that Vishvavasu, the great Gandharva, his mind stupefied with infatuation, fell from his airplane after seeing your daughter playing with a ball on the roof of the palace. For she was indeed beautiful, with her tinkling ankle bells and her eyes moving to and fro. So, right, Srila Prabhupada begins the purport that even in those days, this is Satya Yuga, we must bear that in mind. This is Satya Yuga, and things, people were extremely capable. So in Satya Yuga, there were skyscrapers, and there were also airplanes, private airplanes, helicopters, and different creations which could take you through the sky. Yeah. And this Gandharva Vishvavasu was in one of those. It says, Swad Vimanad. Prabhupada points that out. It means from his own airplane. So private airplanes or helicopters were current. And he saw Devahuti playing some ball game on the roof of the palace. So that means ball games were also current. But for the girls, they would never do these things publicly. And so they're on the roof of the palace, just completely secluded in a very, very private place. And Prabhupada makes the point that ball playing and other such pleasures were not for ordinary women and girls, but only for the higher classes, aristocracy, like Devahuti. So she was seen on top of the palace. So it must have been from an airplane, and Vishvavasu was so overwhelmed he fell out of the plane. Amazing. Right, okay, so verse 18. What wise man would not welcome her, the very ornament of womanhood, the beloved daughter of Swayambhuva Manu and sister of Uttanapad? Those who have not worshipped the gracious feet of the goddess of fortune cannot even perceive her. Yet she has come of her own accord to seek my hand. So Kardama Muni is appreciating Devahuti in different ways. Beauty, qualification. She's the ornament of all ornamented beautiful girls. A girl, generally it's understood, a girl becomes beautiful or beautified by her ornaments. But Devahuti was more beautiful than her ornaments, and she beautified the ornaments. So therefore even demigods and Gandharvas, who are a type of demigod, like lesser demigod, they were attracted by her. So Kardama, of course, he was not from the heavenly planets, but Vishwavasu was, and he was attracted to her. So Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, besides her personal beauty, she was the daughter of Emperor Swayambhuva and sister of King Uttanapad. Who could refuse the hand of such a girl? Yes, of course. So verse 19, therefore I shall accept this chaste girl as my wife, on the condition, important, on the condition that after she bears semen from my body, in other words, after giving birth to a child, I shall accept the life of devotional service accepted by the most perfect human beings. That process was described by Lord Vishnu. It is free from envy. So there's a substantial purport here. First point, of course, is that Kardama Muni accepts her as his wife, or to be his wife. But the thing was, he didn't want to be a householder for his entire life. At this point, he has been brahmachari, even though he's been desiring, at least for some time, to have a wife. But he's been living the life of a brahmachari. Yes. And Prabhupada describes a bit about that. The first part of life is brahmacharya, for developing character, developing spiritual qualities. Then in the next part of life, grihastha, one can accept a wife and beget children, but not beget children like cats and dogs. Really beget them as rays of Vishnu, to be devotees. So, okay, second paragraph, and actually Kardama wanted a child who would be a ray of the Supreme Lord. Yeah. And for householders, they should beget children who can perform the duties of Vishnu, like render devotional service. Prabhupada says, otherwise, there's no need to beget children. So there are, Prabhupada says, two kinds of children born of good fathers. One is educated in Krishna consciousness, so he can be delivered from Maya in this life and go back to Godhead. And the other, very special one, is a ray of the Lord, who can teach the whole world Krishna consciousness, deliver the whole world, not just himself. That's Srila Prabhupada, of course. So, as will be described as we go on, Kardama Muni begot such a child, Kapila, who is actually the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself. So the great householders, Advanced householders, very sincere devotees, pray to the Lord to send them a representative, so that humanity can be helped. And of course, another reason is so that the parents can train the child, so the child won't have to take birth again. But if they can raise a child who's capable of delivering the world, what to speak of himself or herself, all the better. And the parents basically, as a bottom line, should see that their children don't have to take birth again. And if you can't do that, don't have children. Don't have children. Yeah. Because if children become just like cats and dogs, which is the normal program, it creates such a disturbance in society, like now in Kali Yuga. It's just absolutely terrible, and Prabhupada says the world becomes hellish. So Kardama makes it clear he will not stay with her all his life, but rather until she has had a child, Prabhupada says. In other words, sex life is only for having a nice child, no other purpose. Not for any type of just enjoyment, recreational activity. Human life is meant for devotional service, and we're taught that by Lord Chaitanya. So there's also a shorter third paragraph. So the man, after producing a nice child, should take sannyas and become a Paramahansa. Yes, that's the highest level of sannyas. There are 4 stages in sannyas: Bahudak, Kuti Chak, Parivrajacharya, and Paramahansa. Yeah, so the husband, after producing nice child, should take sannyas and come to the Paramahansa stage, first class, topmost stage of sannyas. Right. And Srimad Bhagavatam, and how to do that? Well, very important part of how to come to Paramahansa level. Study Srimad Bhagavatam, and it's called the Paramahansa Samhita, the treatise for the highest humans. So Prabhupada makes the point the Paramahansas are free from envy, and devotees should become free from envy. Prabhupada says that at least in the Paramahansa stage, one should be completely engaged in Krishna consciousness, and there's no scope for envy. Yes. And Prabhupada makes the point that Bhaktivinoda Thakur did that. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he wanted a child who would be a ray of Vishnu, and he got Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, who spread Krishna consciousness and had Prabhupada as his disciple, who under the shelter of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. Right, so verse 20. The highest authority for me is the unlimited Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whom this wonderful creation emanates, and in whom its sustenance and dissolution rest. He is the origin of all Prajapatis, the personalities meant to produce living entities in this world. And again, there's a fairly substantial purport, kind of similar theme. Karadama was ordered by his father, who's Lord Brahma, who's also known as Prajapati, to produce children. Prajapatis were meant to produce large numbers of children. But Karadama is saying that even though my father ordered me to produce ideally a lot of children, and the father is generally the authority for the son, but for Karadama, his origin was Vishnu, not just Lord Brahma, not just his father. So therefore, even though normally the son will follow the instructions of the biological father, Karadama, feeling that Lord Vishnu is his father, his worshipable deity, he wants to do what Lord Vishnu wants. Therefore, he's not prepared to produce a lot of children. He'll produce one child, very good child, who will help the mission not just of his father, but of Lord Vishnu. Yes. So that was his approach, his understanding and his approach. Then in the second paragraph, it said that having a child is considered to liquidate one's debts to the family that one is born in. Actually, there are many, many debts on a child just after the child's birth. There are debts to the family, debts to the demigods. Prabhupada's explaining this. Debts to the family. They bring the child up. They feed the child, protect the child, clothe the child, train the child until the child becomes an adult and is able to deal with life himself. But until that time, the child is dependent on the family. So what debts? Big debts to the family. And of course the demigods, they provide all necessities. Debts to the forefathers even. But Prabhupada makes the point, if we just serve the Lord, then we liquidate all of those obligations. Yes. Even without trying to liquidate the other debts, just engage in the service of the Lord. And Srila Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, Karadama Muni preferred to devote his life as a servant of the Lord in Paramahansa knowledge and to beget a child only for that purpose, not to beget numberless children to fill up the vacancies in the universe. Okay, so now the fourth section, verse 21 to verse 25. Let's have a look. And it's called The Wedding is Carried Out. Okay, so let us read the verses. So, 21, Sri Maitreya said, O great warrior Vidura, the sage Karadama said this much only, and then became silent, thinking of his worshipable Lord Vishnu, who has a lotus on his navel. As he silently smiled, his face captured the mind of Devahuti, who began to meditate upon the great sage. Verse 22. After having unmistakably known the decision of the queen, as well as that of Devahuti, the emperor most gladly gave his daughter to the sage, whose host of virtues was equaled by hers. 23. Empress Shatarupa lovingly gave most valuable presents suitable for the occasion, such as jewelry, clothes, and household articles, in dowry to the bride and bridegroom. 24. Thus relieved of his responsibility by handing over his daughter to a suitable man, Swayambhuva Manu, his mind agitated by feelings of separation, embraced his affectionate daughter with both his arms. 25. The emperor was unable to bear the separation of his daughter. Therefore tears poured from his eyes again and again, drenching his daughter's head as he cried, "My dear mother, my dear daughter." Pretty deep. Okay, so it's the fourth section, verse 21 to verse 25. The wedding is carried out. 21. Sri Maitreya said, "O great warrior Vidura, the sage Karadama said this much only, and then became silent, thinking of his worshipable Lord Vishnu, who has a lotus on his navel. As he silently smiled, his face captured the mind of Devahuti, who began to meditate upon the great sage." Right. So Prabhupada makes the point that it appears that Karadama Muni was fully Krishna conscious. Because when he became silent, he thought of Lord Vishnu. That's Krishna consciousness, that the pure devotees are so absorbed in thought of Krishna, they have no other engagement. Although they may see to do so many different things, but actually they always think of Krishna. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the smile of such a Krishna-conscious person is so attractive that simply by smiling, he wins so many admirers, disciples, and followers. All right, verse 22. After having unmistakably known the decision of the queen, as well as that of Devahuti, the emperor most gladly gave his daughter to the sage, whose host of virtues was equaled by hers. So there's no purport here. So on to verse 23. Empress Shatarupa lovingly gave most valuable presents suitable for the occasion, such as jewelry, clothes, and household articles, in dowry to the bride and bridegroom. Okay. Prabhupada, there are two paragraphs here, but Prabhupada in the first paragraph basically discusses the system of dowry, and particularly, in this case, the dowry for an empress's daughter. Yes, the dowry is given to the daughter. Well, first of all, the father gives the daughter in charity, and then with the daughter gives a dowry. And it's still going on, even though in India it's illegal, from what I understand. I heard that. But it's still going on. Yes. And the gifts are given, of course, by the father of the bride to the bridegroom, to the husband of the bride. Yes, and of course they're given according to the position of the father of the bride. and it shows goodwill. It shows goodwill, and traditionally, at least, it's compulsory. So all sorts of things then were given to Karadama. That's basically the point. So in this way, Karadama Muni was married with opulence. He was married with full opulence to his qualified wife. Lots of household paraphernalia was given. And this is still a tradition in India, at least in Prabhupada's time. But I hear, I don't know, I've never been to such an event ever. I mean, like a real Indian marriage. I've been to a number of devotee marriages, but a real, like, traditional Hindu marriage. Prabhupada says it's not illegal. Anyway, so dowries, yes. They're given by the father to show goodwill. If he can't, if he's so poor, he must at least give a fruit and a flower. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, when there's financial inability and no question of accumulating a dowry by another means, one can give a fruit and flower for the satisfaction of the bridegroom. Verse 24. Thus relieved of his responsibility by handing over his daughter to a suitable man, Swayambhuva Manu, his mind agitated by feelings of separation, embraced his affectionate daughter with both his arms. So Srila Prabhupada, this is a very intense situation here. Prabhupada explains how a father always remains in anxiety until he can hand over his grown-up daughter to a suitable boy. And the father and mother's, the parents' responsibility for children continues until they get them married to suitable spouses. And when the father can do that, particularly the father, he's relieved of his responsibilities. Yeah. Then he can take sannyas. Traditionally that would be the idea, actually. But at least he's relieved of his responsibilities. Verse 25. The emperor was unable to bear the separation of his daughter. Therefore tears poured from his eyes again and again, drenching his daughter's head as he cried, "My dear mother, my dear daughter." So he, according to the verse, he addressed her as Amba. Prabhupada says the word Amba is significant, that a father sometimes addresses his daughter out of affection as mother, and sometimes as my darling. So Prabhupada explains that the feeling of separation continues because until the daughter's married, she remains a daughter of the father, but after marriage, she is no longer his daughter. That's the traditional idea. Becomes the property of the husband. Prabhupada actually uses that terminology. She must remain the property of the father. This is according to Manu Samhita. While she's not married, and she must remain the property of the husband until she's elderly and has grown-up children of her own. Then she becomes the property of her sons. So this is the case with Devahuti. So Manu handed her to Karadama, and when Karadama leaves home, he hands over the responsibility to Kapila. So Prabhupada says all of this is going to be explained in the course of this whole narration over the next few chapters. All right, so next we go on to the 5th section. It's verse 26 to verse 39 till the end of the chapter. Till the end of the chapter. And it's titled Swayambhuva Manu Returns to His Capital. Right, so as usual we must read the verses. It's a fairly long section. Verses 26 and 27. After asking and obtaining the great sage's permission to leave, the monarch mounted his chariot with his wife and started for his capital, followed by his retinue. Along the way he saw the prosperity of the tranquil seers' beautiful hermitages on both the charming banks of the Saraswati, the river so agreeable to saintly persons. 28. Overjoyed to know of his arrival, his subjects came forth from Brahmavarta to greet their returning Lord with songs, prayers, and musical instruments. Verses 29 and 30 together. The city of Barhishmati, rich in all kinds of wealth, was so called because Lord Vishnu's hair dropped there from his body when he manifested himself as Lord Boar. As he shook his body, this very hair fell and turned into blades of evergreen kusha grass and kasha, which Prabhupada says, another kind of grass used for mats, by means of which the sages worshipped Lord Vishnu after defeating the demons who had interfered with the performance of their sacrifices. 31. Manu spread a seat of kushas, and kashas, and worshipped the Lord, the personality of Godhead, by whose grace he had obtained the rule of the terrestrial globe. 32. Having entered the city of Barhishmati, in which he had previously lived, Manu entered his palace, which was filled with an atmosphere that eradicated the 3 miseries of material existence. 33. Emperor Swayambhuva Manu enjoyed life with his wife and subjects and fulfilled his desires without being disturbed by unwanted principles contrary to the process of religion. Celestial musicians and their wives sang in chorus about the pure reputation of the emperor, and early in the morning every day he used to listen to the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with a loving heart. 34. Thus Swayambhuva Manu was a saintly king. Although absorbed in material happiness, he was not dragged to the lowest grade of life, for he always enjoyed his material happiness in a Krishna-conscious atmosphere. 35. Consequently, although his duration of life gradually came to an end, his long life, consisting of a Manvantara era, was not spent in vain, since he ever engaged in hearing. Ever means always. He always engaged in hearing, contemplating, writing down, and chanting the pastimes of the Lord. Right, verse 36. He passed his time, which lasted 71 cycles of the 4 ages, 71 times 4,320,000 years, So he spent his time, all that time, always thinking of Vasudeva and always engaged in matters regarding Vasudeva. Thus he transcended the three destinations. Okay, all right, we move on. Verse 37. Therefore, O Vidura, how can persons completely under the shelter of Lord Krishna in devotional service be put into miseries pertaining to the body, the mind, nature, and other men and living creatures? Verse 38. In reply to questions asked by certain sages, he, Swayambhuva Manu, out of compassion for all living entities, taught the diverse sacred duties of men in general and the different varanas and ashrams. 39. I have spoken to you of the wonderful character of Swayambhuva Manu, the original king, whose reputation is worthy of description. Please hear as I speak of the flourishing of his daughter, Devahuti. So that's the end of that chapter, but now we have to go through it with the purports. Okay, so 26 to 39, Swayambhuva Manu returns to his capital. It's the fifth section. So first of all, verses 26 and 27. After asking and obtaining the great sage's permission to leave, the monarch mounted his chariot with his wife and started for his capital, followed by his retinue. Along the way he saw the prosperity of the tranquil seers' beautiful hermitages on both the charming banks of the Saraswati, the river so agreeable to saintly persons. So there's a short paragraph here. Okay. Just as in modern cities, there's all sorts of engineering, architectural craftsmanship, very nice arrangements, and so on. So in previous times, there were different neighborhoods. There were neighborhoods called Rishi Kulas, where saintly people lived. And still in India, in some places by the Yamuna and Ganges, there are areas where saintly people live. So Manu and his party, they were satisfied to see the beauty of the Rishi Kulas. So Prabhupada makes the point that, in conclusion actually, of the purport, the great sages had no skyscrapers, but the hermitages were so beautiful that the king was very much pleased at the sight. Right, so now he comes back to his home, verse 28. Overjoyed to know of his arrival, his subjects came forth from Brahmavarta to greet their returning Lord with songs, prayers, and musical instruments. So yes, it's the custom of the citizens of the kingdom to receive the king when he returns from a tour. And we read about that in regard to Lord Krishna when he returned to Dwaraka following the Battle of Kurukshetra, if you remember. So in the past, the cities, capital cities, the biggest cities, were surrounded by walls, and there were different gates. So even in Delhi now, Prabhupada makes the point, even in Delhi now, some older cities, Jaipur, their walls around, at least around the old part of the city, and they have gates where the citizens in the past would gather to receive the king. So the people gathered there, nicely dressed with musical instruments, etc., to receive the emperor very nicely. All right, so verses 29 and 30. The city of Barhishmati, rich in all kinds of wealth, was so called because Lord Vishnu's hair dropped there from his body when he manifested himself as Lord Boar. As he shook his body, this very hair fell and turned into blades of evergreen kusha grass and kasha, which is another type of grass used for mats, by means of which the sages worshipped Lord Vishnu. After defeating the demons, they worshipped Lord Varaha, or they would worship Lord Vishnu after defeating demons who had interfered with the performances of their sacrifices. So there's a purport here. First point is, any place directly connected with the Supreme Lord is called a Pitha-stan, Pitha-stan, Pitha. So Barhishmati was a very special place. It's the capital of Swayambhuva Manu, exalted not just because the city was very rich in wealth, but because the hairs of Lord Varaha fell at that spot. And then later, those hairs grew as green grass, and the sages would use that grass in their process of worshipping the Lord. Yes, after his killing Hiranyaksha. So yagya, of course, yagya means Vishnu, the Supreme Lord. Karma is described as yagyarta in Bhagavad Gita. So therefore, yagyarta karma means work done only for the satisfaction of Vishnu. If something is done for sense gratification, it will bind the performer to this world. So if you want to be free from reactions to your work, then you have to do everything for the satisfaction of Lord Vishnu or yagya. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, in the capital of Swayambhuva Manu, Barhishmati, these particular functions were being performed by the great sages and saintly persons. Right, verse 31. Manu spread a seat of kushas and kashas and worshipped the Lord, the personality of Godhead, by whose grace he had obtained the rule of the terrestrial globe. Right, so there's a fair purport here, a single paragraph. Manu is the father of mankind, and from Manu comes the word man, or in Sanskrit, manusya. Yeah. So Prabhupada makes the point that those who are well situated in the world with sufficient wealth, etc., should especially take lessons from Manu, who acknowledged that his kingdom and opulence were gifts from the Supreme Lord. And therefore, in that mood, always acknowledging his indebtedness, Manu always engaged in devotional service. So, well-situated people, they must do like that also. The wealth, etc., should be used for the Lord in sacrifices and whatever ways which the qualified Brahmins want. Yes, their wealth should be used for the Lord, because no one can become wealthy or get a good birth or education without the mercy of the Lord. So therefore those who have these valuable facilities must acknowledge the mercy of the Lord by worshipping him. And then when this is done, the place becomes like Vaikuntha. Yes. Free from the threefold miseries of this material world. Adhyatmic, adhibhotic, adhidaivik. So anyway, our mission in Kali Yuga, the mission of Krishna consciousness, is that we want everyone to acknowledge the supremacy of Krishna, and that everything that everyone has is a gift of the Lord, and then everyone engage in devotional service. That's what we want. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, if one wants to be happy and peaceful in his position, either as a householder or citizen or member of human society, one must promote devotional service for the pleasure of the Lord. Right, carrying on, verse 32. Having entered the city of Barhishmati, in which he had previously lived, Manu entered his palace, which was filled with an atmosphere that eradicated the three miseries of material existence. Yes, so this material world, material life is full of the threefold miseries we just mentioned. Adhyatmic, miseries coming from your own body and mind. I mean, as they're presented here, first of all, adhyatmic, then adhidaivik, miseries pertaining to natural disturbances, like it's too hot, it's too cold, these types of things. And then miseries arising from other living entities, like suddenly your country gets attacked out of the blue. Right, so human society then should create a spiritual atmosphere by spreading Krishna consciousness. And this is a very important point, that it's not that when you become Krishna conscious, the miseries vanish, but they have no effect when one's absorbed in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada makes the point, we cannot actually stop the miseries, but Krishna consciousness is antiseptic, and therefore we are not affected by them. So therefore, for the Krishna conscious person, both heaven and hell are equal. Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, how Swayambhuva Manu created an atmosphere wherein he was not affected by material miseries is explained in the following verses. Verse 33, Emperor Swayambhuva Manu enjoyed his life with his wife and subjects and fulfilled his desires without being disturbed by unwanted principles contrary to the process of religion. Celestial musicians and their wives sang in chorus about the pure reputation of the Lord. And early in the morning every day, he used to listen to the pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead with a loving heart. So there's fairly extensive purport here. Again, Prabhupada makes the point that human society, human life, is meant for realizing perfection in Krishna consciousness. And so in that regard, there's no restriction against living with a wife and children, but you have to do so. One must do so in such ways that you're not going against Dharma, Artha, Kama, and Moksha. Actually, you should do it in such a way that you eventually become Krishna conscious and go back home, back to Godhead. Vedic principles are there to guide us in fulfilling material desires and at the same time becoming liberated, going back to Godhead. So the second paragraph, Swayambhuva Manu. He enjoyed his household life in this way, following these principles. In the morning, musicians would come and sing about the Lord. The emperor and his family would hear about those pastimes. And Prabhupada makes the point that this still goes on in some of the very wealthy families or royal families and some of the temples. Yeah, you wake up to Shanai, nice atmosphere. Then you go to bed with Shanai and hearing the pastimes of the Lord. That's the way to live. In the evening Srimad Bhagavatam class and nice atmosphere by Sankirtan. It's a very old system, and Swayambhuva Manu did this and was peaceful and prosperous. So there's a third paragraph here. In every palace or rich man's house there was a temple. Everyone went to Mangal Arati, all the family members. And so everyone got up early. Then the Lord Krishna would get up early, have some light refreshment, and then give audience to his devotees. Then the devotees would go back home or else sing the glories of the Lord in the temple. And that early morning ceremony still takes place in some of the temples. Yeah. And in some of the palaces. Temples are meant for the assembly of the general public. And temples within palaces, especially for the royal families. But in many of these palaces, in many of these palace temples, the public is also allowed in. And Prabhupada gives the example of Jaipur. You may have been there. For Mangal Arati every day, there's always at least 500 devotees. And after Mangal Arati, they sit down and sing what they call Dun. Yeah. So Bhagavad Gita makes the point that those who have been devotees but failed to be completely successful, so they take birth again, then they're born in such families, and then they can become Krishna conscious. And Prabhupada concludes the purport by saying, the perfection which he failed to attain in his last life is again offered in this life, and he can make himself perfect without fail. Okay, so verse 34. Thus Swayambhuva Manu was a saintly king. Although absorbed in material happiness, he was not dragged to the lowest grade of life, for he always enjoyed his material happiness in a Krishna-conscious atmosphere. So Prabhupada makes the point that kingly enjoyment, material enjoyment, usually drags people down because it's just sense gratification, to a very, lots of sense gratification. Usually drags people down to animal life, but not Swayambhuva Manu. He was as good as a saintly person. He was like a Rajarshi, a king, but a rishi at the same time. And this is because of the atmosphere at home, being fully Krishna conscious, the training. And Prabhupada makes the point that everyone can achieve this if you create a Krishna conscious atmosphere at home by deity worship, temple worship, kirtan, etc. Krishna consciousness does not stop people from enjoying life, but it regulates their habits. Yes. And in this way, they keep focused in Krishna consciousness and are liberated in this life by Krishna consciousness and by chanting the holy names. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. verse 35. Consequently, although his duration of life gradually came to an end, his long life, consisting of a Manvantara era, was not spent in vain, since he ever engaged in hearing, contemplating, writing down, and chanting the pastimes of the Lord. He was always engaged like that. So, Prabhupada makes interesting point that as freshly prepared food becomes stale and tasteless if it's left for 3 or 4 hours, so material life may feel nice. The material enjoyment may continue as long as life is fresh. But otherwise, particularly the end of life, when you've done everything and you've overdone everything, it becomes tasteless and everything seems vain and painful. But Swayambhuva's life didn't become tasteless. It remained fresh because of his Krishna consciousness. And Prabhupada refers to a verse in the Bhagavatam which says that the sun, by rising and setting, reduces the life of everyone, but not for the devotees, because their lives are eternal. So Manu remained engaged in Krishna consciousness, hearing and chanting, so his life was not stale. He was great king, but he was also the greatest yogi, because he never wasted time. When he talked, it was only about Krishna. When he heard something, it was only about Krishna. When he meditated, it was only on Krishna. Right. Okay, and then there's a very short second paragraph that his life was very long, 71 yugas, or cycles of the yugas actually. One yuga, it can be called a yuga or a Mahayuga, all 4 ages. All 4 yugas is 4,320,000 years, and 71 of those is the lifetime of a Manu, and there are 14 such Manus in a day of Brahma. So therefore, for his entire life, 4,320,000 times 71, Manu was engaged. He was engaged in hearing and chanting and meditating on Krishna. Therefore, his life was not wasted, nor did it become stale. Verse 36. We'll carry on and finish the chapter. So 36, he passed his time, which lasted 71 cycles of the 4 ages, 71 times 4,320,000 years, always thinking of Vasudeva and always engaged in matters regarding Vasudeva. Thus he transcended the 3 destinations. So the 3 destinations are meant for people who are under the control of the 3 modes. Sometimes they're described as being the awakened stage, the dreaming stage, and the fully, like deep sleep, fully unconscious stage. And sometimes 3 destinations means destinations of the people in the modes. In the mode of goodness, destination higher planets, mode of passion, destination earth, maybe heavenly planets, maybe not. Mode of ignorance, people in ignorance, animal life, on planets where life is lower than humans. So therefore, but a person in Krishna consciousness is above the modes, of course. And And Prabhupada concludes the paragraph by saying, although Swayambhuva Manu, the ruler of this material world, appeared to be absorbed in material happiness, he was neither in the mode of goodness nor in the modes of passion or ignorance, but in the transcendental stage. So there is a second paragraph. One who's fully engaged in devotional service is always liberated. Bilva Mangal Thakur, great devotee, said that as long as I'm engaged in service to the Lord, then liberation's always engaged in my service. And the complete perfections of material enjoyment, religion, economic development, these things are at my command. So generally people are after dharma, artha, kama, and moksha, religion for material gain, sense gratification, and then after becoming frustrated, they want liberation or becoming one with God. But these are for the less intelligent. Those who are intelligent practice Krishna consciousness. They don't care about dharma, artha, kama, and moksha. So, and then the devotees come to the position above liberation. What to speak of dharma, artha, and kama? They come to the transcendental platform and go back to Godhead, Brahma Bhuta. Verse 37, therefore, O Vidura, how can persons completely under the shelter of Lord Krishna in devotional service be put into miseries pertaining to the body, mind, nature, and other men and living creatures? So it's very short purport. We're right at the end of the chapter. Every living entity in this world is afflicted by some kind of miseries from the three types, either from your own body or mind, or from natural disturbances, or other living entities, or two of them, or all three. Yeah. Cold in winter, hot in summer, and so on and so forth. But a devotee is not disturbed by any of these. Verse 38, in reply to questions asked by certain sages, he, Swayambhuva Manu, out of compassion for all living entities, taught the diverse sacred duties of men in general and the different varnas and ashrams. Verse 39, I have spoken to you of the wonderful character of Swayambhuva Manu, the original king, whose reputation is worthy of description. Please hear as I speak of the flourishing of his daughter, Devahuti. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.